Clear front.
Wings traffic, Cirrus 123 Papa Charlie, taxiing from the upper ramp to runway 24. Wings. Okay, so we're getting ready to depart off of Wings Field in suburban Philadelphia. Today we're going to fly down to the Baltimore, Washington, Maryland area. We're going to meet with two great startups. Our route of flight today, we're going to go west out of the Wings Field, and when we're going to start heading south, what's really cool is we're going to go around the DC area. It's restricted airspace because you're near the capital. It's kind of IFR this morning, so we delayed our departure a little bit, so the weather was a little bit better when we get into Manassas, and let's go. All right, we're going to line up with the center line and full power. Here we go. Looks look good. Okay, airspeed's alive. We're looking for 77 knots for rotation. 55, looking for 77, about 80 next. 77, here we go, rotate. Wings traffic, Cirrus 123 Papa Charlie off the runway 24, climbing out at 600 feet, departing to the west. Last call, wings. Philly approach, good morning, Cirrus 123 Papa Charlie off of Wings, passing through 800 feet.
123 Papa Charlie, climb maintain 5,000.
Harrisburg approach, good morning, Cirrus 123 Papa Charlie, 6,000.
November 3 Papa Charlie, fly heading 240.
Potomac approach, good morning, Cirrus 123 Papa Charlie, 5,000, information echo.
123 Papa Charlie, cross Gigi, 3,000, cleared ILS, runway 16 left, Manassas.
Shows us the runway on the screen in front of us.
500.
500 feet above the ground. Power back, look down the runway, leave in our happy spot, hold it off. We're down. Ground, good morning, Cirrus 123 Papa Charlie at Bravo 3, we're going over to APP.
Well, that was a good landing.
Thank you. There's a rule in aviation. Any landing you can walk away from is a good landing.
Good landing.
Wow, look how pretty those planes are.
Welcome to Manassas.
I'm Fahad Rahman from Clifton, Virginia, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Lumi Health. So the reason that I started Lumi Health was that my dad has heart failure, and heart failure affects over 6 million people in the United States. And even though he's super engaged with his health, it was continuously really difficult to manage his medications and to work with his cardiologist. So that's the problem that Lumi is solving. It's a really big problem with massive impact, and that's why we're determined to make an impact here.
Hey, I'm Steve from Dreamit. Nice to meet you.
I'm Fahad from Lumi Health. Nice to meet you as well.
Thank you. Love to learn more about what you're doing, give you some feedback, and let's hear your pitch.
Awesome. Excited to tell you more about what we're up to.
Cool. So what's the one-liner? What's Lumi Health?
So let me give you a little bit of snapshot of the things that you might want to know right up front.
Watch the Dreamit disc. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Love the content you guys are putting out there. Yeah. So 99% of heart failure patients are on the wrong or suboptimal medication therapy, and this leads to a lot of extra spend and excess death. Our solution is an AI-driven, tech-enabled, and device-enabled service that works with cardiologists to help them select and adjust medications per the latest guidelines.
Okay.
So the market for this, there's $23 billion available for the 4.3 million patients on Medicare with heart failure. Our TAM in the US is roughly about $9 billion, and our initial customer segment is working with cardiology practices that have 6 or more physicians. Our traction to date is we have 2 cardiology practices that are piloting our solution, and we're contracting with 5 health systems around the country. For a really robust 2022. A little bit about the team. The founders, my co-founder and I, we're both senior experts in care delivery and technology enablement, particularly the ingredients you need to do something like this from Geisinger Health System. We're raising our seed round of around $2 to $3 million to achieve $3 million of ARR by the end of next year and hopefully be ready for a Series A.
Got it. By the way, I really like that you did that flashback pitch deck. We have a Dreamit dose on that. You know, it gives the high-level summary of what everybody wants to know. That's going through their mind, like just at a high level, and then let's dive in. So,
I'm glad you recognized it. So our mission is to reduce billions of dollars in spend and save lives by improving how cardiologists manage medications for these patients. It's actually very, very difficult to manage
assume
medications.
your problem statement you're going to get into is like, what is the problem? What's the mistake cardiologists are making today in managing medications for heart failure patients, right?
Great question.
Yep.
So there's 6 million patients with heart failure, and almost all of them are not on the right medication therapy.
U.S. or global? Is that a U.S.?
That's a U.S. statistic.
Okay.
There's way more globally.
All right.
And let me give you an idea of the problem as you
Sure.
asked. So this is Dr. Susie, a cardiologist.
Yep.
Dr. Susie has to do this really effectively, incorporate the latest guidelines around medications, manage 9 or more medications for these patients, prioritize which patients have the most urgent needs, and then integrate really important biomarkers that they don't actually have access to right now, such as blood pressure and weight and blood oxygen saturation levels from in the home. Trying to integrate all this stuff leads to a lot of confusion, a lot of stress, and often it's not happening in the right time frame for the patients to actually get the benefits of the medications.
But a question, I mean, is a lot of what you're focusing on, it's medication management, right?
Yes.
So why is this the cardiologist and not, for instance, the pharmacist? Why are you focused on, like, to me it would be, well, actually I guess it's because the cardiologist is writing the script.
Absolutely.
But you're saying that cardiologist isn't interacting with a pharmacist, they're just doing it off their knowledge, their experience.
Absolutely. So the way that the problem gets indexed is cardiologists take the lead on managing the medications. They often don't have the time, and often there's a lot of other things that they need to do, maybe put a stent in somebody, maybe do some other things that are interventional that take precedence. So what happens is these decisions are delayed oftentimes. It's not that they're not done, they're just not done effectively and iteratively. So in that delay time frame, you have patients that end up in the hospital that might have a cardiac event, and that leads to the unnecessary spend and avoidable death that we were talking about.
Okay.
So solving this means really helping to relieve pressure on the patient's lives by improving their clinical outcomes and reducing unnecessary spend in the system. That's a manifestation of this problem.
Okay. And do you have an idea, like what percentage of patients today, and maybe you get into it later in your deck, what percentage of patients today are impacted by this? Meaning are 97% of patients, they're on the wrong medication to the point where it actually has a material adverse event or material impact on them? Or is it 3%? Like, what are the numbers around this?
There's a statistic that we know that says about 1 in 5 heart failure-related readmissions are due to medication-related errors or problems.
So let me just restate that, though. So would you say about 20%, you said 1 in 5, are about 20% of patients, heart failure patients today, the cardiologist, there's an honest mistake being made from an indication point of view that's causing a severe impact in 20%? Like, I'm just trying to get an idea, like, got it, there's a problem.
Sure.
It impacts some people severely. What percentage of those people are actually impacted severely?
Yeah, I guess maybe the way that I would rephrase the question instead of indexing on severity is there are evidence-based guidelines around how medication should be prescribed and which medication should be selected and the dosage.
Right.
I think we can agree that physicians should follow those protocols.
Sure, got it.
99% of heart failure patients are not on those prescribed guidelines. So the problem to solve first is getting everybody on the guideline-directed medical therapy, right?
Okay, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing. So with Lumi Health, cardiologists can manage medications for these patients 10 times faster than they're doing right now. And that solves a lot of the inconsistencies and the time-based challenges. We're taking a full stack approach to this, and I'll walk you through the components of what a full stack approach means. One, we've developed a medication intervention platform. So this is the tech part that recommends medication and dosage improvement opportunities to get cardiologists and nudge them back to guideline-directed medical therapy based on what the established protocols are. So this solves a lot of those problems around what Dr. Susie had around incorporating guidelines, knowing what the latest guidelines are, what the latest medications are. This is where we're solving that and identifying where the improvements are. The next is the device piece. So, there are in-home biomarkers that we said that are missing, right? Blood pressure, weight, blood oxygen saturation levels, as well as others. So we put devices out there, we capture those in-home biomarkers, and we layer them on top of the clinical data that we already have about the patient.
Got it. And you're not making the device, right? You're using some
No, we're
off-the-shelf
using somebody
stuff.
else's device, exactly.
Great.
And then the third part is, and this is kind of getting to your earlier question around, well, could a pharmacist do this? Exactly. A lot of this stuff can be done by a pharmacist, and this is where the full stack approach really comes in. We have a virtual care team, so we wrap our technology and our devices with a pharmacist-led and RN-supported team to really help to identify where the dosage improvement opportunities are, where some symptomatology may be coming from the patient that can be assessed or intervened on, what the biomarkers are that are coming from the readings, and identify and validate and then escalate the most important opportunities of the cardiologist. Because remember, the cardiologists don't have time. So how are we going to prioritize? We're going to prioritize by validating the most urgent issues. And then lastly, we have machine learning-based algorithms that are helping us identify which patients are at risk based on rising clinical risk events. So this is artificial intelligence that we based off of clinical data, biomarker data, and claims data. And this helps to then further escalate and prioritize and answer that question that almost every physician we ever work with has: who are the 10 or 15 patients I really need to worry about today?
To focus on, can I just ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Though? So you start off your solution slide with it's 10x faster medication management, but I didn't hear anything in the problem that the problem was a speed issue. Right? You said here are the 4 components of the problem, that they're getting the wrong medication, which has an impact on patients dying and cost.
Absolutely.
Right? But it wasn't, well, it's just not fast enough.
And I guess maybe this could have been articulated better, but around, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about with physicians is that they can do it. It just takes them longer to do it. Right?
Sure.
And then because of that length of time yields excess spend and unnecessary clinical deterioration. So great point though. So here's what our customers experience from working with us. So the first thing is helping them attain at least 95% compliance with medication and dosage protocols per the latest guidelines. The second is, and we'll get into this a little bit more, is helping to generate about $3,500 or more per patient per year in incremental revenue that they're not tapping into right now, responding to patient needs a lot quicker, but also with a fuller picture, because now we have clinical data, medication data, as well as biomarker data layered on top of each other. And then lastly, and I think every physician that we've ever worked with, is how do you bring a solution that actually gives me time back on the calendar, right?
So patients are better, you're saving money, they're making more money, and you're getting time back.
Absolutely,
So
you summarized it
win.
perfectly. And this isn't theoretical, right? So we're already piloting our platform across 600 heart failure patients. Let me share a few of the earlier insights that we found. One is that, when we did an analysis of all these patients, we found that 86% of these patients were not at target dose, and that almost 80% of all prescriptions were also not at target dose.
And this is your data.
This is our data. So even though our cardiology practices were doing way better than the average, there's still a massive improvement opportunity. But then the question begs itself, what do you improve? How do you improve it? Which levers can you actually functionally move on? Because there's a limited amount of time and we have to have impact. And then what we also found was that almost following Pareto's rule here, the 80-20 rule, 75% of the improvement opportunity was concentrated in 3 classes of medication and 3 providers. So now we know where we can get our lift. And this is what we're working on right now in these pilots, is working with these providers and working across these medication classes as our primary entry point to help move those numbers on compliance higher.
Cool. By the way, we go back and forth at Dreamit. Like there's pilots, there's trials, they're paid, unpaid. I'm just kind of curious. Doesn't matter. Are these paid
These
pilots?
are paid. Yeah, we don't do free pilots.
Yay, awesome. Yay.
So great question. How do you get paid, right? We're tapping into what is a relatively untapped revenue stream. So Medicare has a lot of funds available for this type of work. There's 4.3 million heart failure patients on Medicare, represents a roughly $23 billion potential funding pool.
Wait, is 4.3 million on Medicare? How many total were there that you said?
6.2.
Okay, got it.
And by 2030, it'll grow to over 8 million.
Wow.
We're generating roughly around $300 of incremental new revenue for these practices, and we charge a recurring monthly fee per patient. So we have a per patient per month revenue model.
Got it.
So a few key factors for success, we believe, in building a company like this. One is we have to help our customers clear adoption hurdles. And there's a lot of adoption hurdles around different things in digital health. One is cost. 2 is the technology implementation into the workflow, technology adoption. So we feel with this tech-enabled approach, we're solving for a lot of these issues, especially tapping into a revenue stream. So there is, so it's new money effectively for our customers.
How is the adoption? Are you seeing that working throughout when you're doing these pilots?
Yes. So the adoption is actually, we're seeing it in the sales process. We have a lot of interest, and the close cycles are actually relatively short, and we're seeing more and more growing interest. So, and as we've implemented, we found that the adoption has improved between the 2 pilots that we've done, and we anticipate with the pilots going forward, there's a lot of learnings that we can apply.
Well, I'm just curious, one key challenge we see in health tech companies and other ones as well that are selling almost like it's B2B and almost enterprise level in a sense, is the sales process takes forever. I'm just kind of curious from the time you're talking, for most of the practices, you're just in a few and you're just at the beginning. What's the time from like first meeting to, okay, let's do a pilot and let's start doing adoption?
So it's typically between 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
And we're typically getting buy-in within the first 2 months.
Awesome.
And then there's contracting, and then then oftentimes there's things around data acquisition, which add friction and so on and so forth.
Right.
So the receptivity that we found is actually really, really high.
I just want to point out one other thing, that your 3 to 6 months is great, besides that you have a good sales background, which we see is missing in a lot of CEOs. They don't have that edge in sales. The other thing we typically see is if you're not solving a really big urgent pain point, and you don't have a really clever, compelling solution that's going to drive huge returns, yeah, you're going to be there at a 12 to 18 month sales cycle because it's not that compelling.
You're
right?
spot on.
When you're going to sit there and say, we are going to save, like what you even said in the beginning, right? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to save the doctor's time. We're going to increase revenue. We're going to save lives. And oh, by the way, we're going to save money overall in the system. You have all 4 of those. It's like, whoa, that's really compelling. How do you say no to it? You're able to close more quickly. Versus you have these like really lightweight, like, well, it's going to be 5 or 10% marginally better. People are like, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
It isn't,
and you sit there in a 12 to 18 month sales cycle and you die because you're trying to raise money. And
So going back to your stakeholders, and I love the way you summarized it, there's one stakeholder we missed, so I'll kind of walk through them. So for the patient, which is the ultimate customer in healthcare, is continuous high quality clinical care to keep them healthy and happy.
Right.
For the provider,
and by the way, the patient would just assume that.
Yeah.
Wait, I don't have continuous high quality clinical care to keep me healthy and happy? That's what I thought I'm getting here. That's why I went to the doctor.
Yeah, and a lot of times the patients that need the most care are the ones that are least engaged with the healthcare system.
Right.
So we solve that problem
Interesting.
too.
Yeah.
So the provider, the physician, or the health system, inspiring confidence in them that those patients are getting the care that they need, but also being able to get paid, through a new revenue stream. So Dr. Susie doesn't look that frazzled anymore. Dr. Susie's confident that Lumi is going to be taking care of their patients and is going to escalate the most urgent patient needs in a timely way. To the payer, which is holding the risk on a lot of these patients, is enjoying the benefits of reduced cost of care while achieving high quality outcomes. Very big imperative for Medicare Advantage, as well as many of the other payers that are out there. And then lastly, for the investor, to be part of something that's important to solve in healthcare, but also realize outsized returns as well in the process.
Cool. And if I ask last question.
Sure.
What's your vision? What's this look like? 2 questions. Sorry. Do you think of this as a platform? Like, are you just doing heart failure issues? Or can't you do this for other indications?
We totally can.
Okay, and I would assume, is that your vision?
Yes, that's
okay,
our vision.
So this is just the instant case.
Yes.
Let's get started here.
Yeah, so we're starting with a bottom-up approach, which is focusing on high acuity, high cost, high needs patients.
Right.
And then from there, building a model that we can then take laterally across the cardiac spectrum, or to non-adjacencies, but comorbidities like hypertension and other medication-sensitive comorbidities.
And that's great because we do a lot of health tech companies, and we see that big hospital systems, they don't want a point solution. They want a platform that they can just, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, but they don't have to keep buying point solutions, so that's really cool. And then it gives you the opportunities, and sales, right? You can do that classic land and expand. We start in cardiology, we get our foot in the door, we start, and then we expand out from there.
Absolutely, and one other thing that we're trying to do is, at the core, we're a technology company and we're building a product. We're just using the product ourselves and wrapping our services around it. So we want that product to be as comprehensive and as wide-ranging as possible, because to the earlier question of, the patient has 9 medications, but there are many medications for non-cardiac related conditions.
Right.
We need to be smart about the entire panel. We can't just be smart about the condition, because so I think of us as a heart failure first company, not a heart failure only company.
Got it. Very cool. Thanks for being on.
Awesome.
That was great.
Thanks for the time.
I'm Kavi Misri from Westchester, New York. I am the CEO and founder of Rose Smarter Mental Health. I founded Rose about 3.5 years ago, kind of based on 2 realizations I had. One was really more on the business side, and the other was more on the personal side. I was born with a congenital heart defect, and through that, I really became interested in learning more about why I was the only child running around with a massive T on my chest due to my 2 open heart surgeries. I went to Fordham University in New York and started with an investment banking career at JP Morgan and SunTrust Robinson Humphrey. After spending about 7 years working about 80 to 100 hour work weeks for that time frame, I finally burned out and I decided to do something about it. So I leveraged my experience as an entrepreneur, as an investor, but most importantly as a patient, to build Rose to what it is today.
Hey, I'm Steve from Dreamit.
Hey, I'm Kavi from Rose Health.
Kavi,
Pleasure.
it's nice to meet you
as well.
let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Love to hear more about what you're doing. Thanks for being on Dreamit Runway.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Let's hear more. So what are you doing at Rose?
So Rose is a digital mental health platform that leverages deep tech for early identification of depression and mood disorder symptoms.
All right.
Once we identify these patients, we then connect them to a live clinician, and we're able to get them the right care at the right time.
Okay. Love to hear how you identify them and stuff. Depression and mental health is a huge market and a huge unmet need.
Correct.
So
yeah. The problem that we're addressing today, and mental health continues to be the forefront of conversation, especially with the pandemic, is that 85 million Americans are experiencing some sort of mental health condition in a given year. However, 80% of them do not get the care they need because of a poor detection, as well as access and treatment issues that are just inadequate and driving significant medical waste.
Okay. So you said 80% don't get the care they need. Does the rest of this slide break that down? Because the question I would have is, you had said because of identification, and then it sounded like an access issue.
Yep.
If you just took the 80% don't get the care they need, can you unpack that? Let's just say that's 100% of the problem.
That is exactly it.
Okay, great. Sure.
And what we're seeing is that 85% of all mental health concerns are being addressed by the primary care clinician.
Right.
However, these primary care clinicians, less than 10% of them feel like they have the acumen or the resources to actually take care of these patients. However, what they can do is, as they're the first line of defense, they can provide a prescription, and then that's pretty much it.
And what percentage of those types of medications for mental health are prescribed by PCP?
75%
Wow.
of all antidepressants are prescribed by a PCP or in the PCP setting.
Right. Okay.
And what we're seeing is that once they're prescribed that medication, the next answer is, okay, like, how can I see a therapist? And the typical response, or the main response, is call the back of your insurance card or go on Psychology Today and look for a therapist. And now, for someone that's depressed and someone who's at the point of at the clinician, it's very difficult for them to spend an hour on the phone calling the insurance carrier, even for busy adults or working adults. And this is where we're seeing the larger problem, where 80% of the population who seek care, they drop out of the system and they give up on their search for a therapist, mostly due to the lack of wherewithal, the long wait times, and the stigma and therapist misfits that we're seeing.
So let me just a bit of feedback.
Yeah, sure.
Like when you're pitching a VC, they have like I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso. It's like you have the memory of a goldfish. What? You know, it's 2 seconds. They have that whole joke about it, right?
Yep.
VCs often have ADD, and it's like they want to go. You know, what's the problem? What's the solution? Especially when you're in a first meeting. One of the things you might want to do with this is just really simplify the problem you solve. Like the way I hear this is you would almost say 85% of people either aren't identified as having this clinical issue, like clinical depression, or excuse me, a type of depression, and they don't have access. It's a really, really big issue. Now, here's the shocker. 75% of the time, it's the PCP that's actually the frontline psychologist or psychiatrist, and they don't feel equipped to do that. That's the problem we solve.
Sure.
We help, I don't know if this is exactly true what we do. We give PCPs knowledge so they can be more, you had said, not confirmative. They have more confidence when they're of what they're doing. And then we help that PCP and the patient get to the care they really need, because it's a really big issue.
It is,
Let me tell you how we solve that. By the way, we can keep going. You don't have to restate it.
Yep.
Like part of what we're going to do on Runway is it's fine. I just give you feedback and you're like, okay, got it. Okay, so what's Rose?
Rose is an integrated solution that leverages a patient-facing platform in the form of a mobile app, as well as a clinician-facing platform where the clinician can see in real time what the patient enters and whether the patient is either progressing or regressing in care.
Got it.
Additionally,
where does it start? Does it start with the physician and the physician says, we're going to use Rose and gets the patient on? Does the patient start the journey? Where does it start?
That's a great question. So it starts typically with the physician.
Okay.
So the physician identifies whether the patient is having irritability, weight fluctuations, certain symptoms of mental health and mood disorder symptoms, and then they would consider them a good candidate for Rose. And the ideal candidate or the ideal patient for Rose is the functional adult that experiences mild to moderate anxiety, depression, trauma,
Got it.
ADHD, and insomnia.
Interesting. Can I tell you, by the way, I liked your answer, and let me tell you why. That it starts with the physician. We see a lot of startups. Oh, no, it starts with the consumer, and then they find physician. Oh, how are you going to be?
Idea.
Yeah, well, I hate it too,
Yeah.
because like, oh, now you're going to be B2C, your consumer.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll just get all these consumers, and how are you going to acquire them? What are you going to do? It's very difficult. So I like that you're starting with the physician, and then you'll come back.
So we have about 30 physician groups who are currently using the platform.
Awesome. That's
we
awesome.
have about 2,500 patients that are actively using the platform on a daily basis. And we also have pilots with 5 large health systems in the United States. And let me tell you how it works. Yeah. So once we close these physician groups or these risk-bearing entities like an ACO, we would then work with their team, and we would integrate an API pull into their EHR.
Okay.
And that API pull looks at over 500 different parameters so that we can pick out the patients that we see as being a potential risk for mental health.
Oh, interesting. So it's not that the patient's coming into the physician saying, I have an issue. It's just you're looking for indicators and triggers or biomarkers or data markers that say.
So but it is a combination.
Got it.
Because a lot of the patients who come to their primary care doctor, they actually don't know that they have the symptoms of some sort of mental health disorder. So it's a combination of both. And in these parameters, we're looking at a lot of things, but some of the main would be medication, certain diagnoses, clinical notes, looking at potential comorbid issues such as someone now being diagnosed with oncology or heart disease or potentially an operation and may be apt to having some sort of mental health disorder.
Okay. And can I ask a quick question, by the way, just so I understand? A lot of times we see for health tech companies, but it's not just health tech, it's a lot of verticals. The question is, where does an application fit in the workflow?
Sure.
Like how during my normal daily life.
Yep.
When the app or your platform is identifying a patient has an issue or has a need, you're doing all that identification and it's dual. Is the physician, I'm just kind of curious, is the physician carrying, an app in their pocket and says, okay, my next, Kavi is my next patient. Let's see what Rose has to say about Kavi. Or is it in a briefing chart and they get, how does the physician get triggered? Like, I'm trying to understand how it fits into their workflow. Because otherwise, the big, if you're adding one more thing for me to look at, I need another app on my phone, I have to check how does that work?
So they get alerted through their dashboard as well as a ping on their phone to notify. However, we know that these clinicians are busy. The workflow is always a significant portion of why certain health systems work or do not work. And that's why we've partnered with a leading care navigational company who is doing the remote patient monitoring of our entire patient base.
Is that after they've seen the physician and now they're going into remote?
Correct.
Got it.
So, and that really closes the gap in mental health care. So the outside care navigation company is actually spending about 90% of the time on the patient.
Yep.
And the reason for that is because there are 2 CPT codes that clinicians can actually get reimbursed for.
Right.
One being remote patient monitoring,
and
the
that
other
code? I forget. There's a
99484,
exactly.
and then there's another code for behavioral health integration.
Right.
So what we're able to now do is actually, on behalf of the clinician, we do the full-blown remote patient monitoring and behavioral health integration, so that we're able to provide a more concise care for that patient and allow for the primary care doctor to be in charge of the patient's care, given the lack of the mental health clinicians that are available today.
If you have about 2,500 patients in your population on a monthly basis, what percentage of them are those care navigators reaching out to saying, I'm going to give you some help?
So the thing is, we build what's called the ROSE score. And the ROSE score is essentially a patient's mental health credit score. For layman terms, it's the BMI.
Okay.
And the way that we assess the ROSE score is based on certain active data collection pieces, passive data collection, as well as digital biomarkers.
Got it.
And that ROSE score is really the focus of what drives the care pathway. And that's really where the identification and our algorithms really work. So we are able to risk stratify the patient into 3 buckets. One is a green, one is yellow, and one is red. For those that are in the green section, we would push them towards using the ROSE platform. We have over 1,000 pieces of content in the form of articles, audio recordings, and videos that's really all aimed at building mental health resiliency and building coping mechanisms. And what we're seeing is that about 64% of all patients and of the population can actually use just the ROSE platform to improve with their depression or anxiety.
Wow.
And while the others on the other end, who are on the yellow or the red, they are then given a care concierge member, and that care concierge member will then call them or schedule an appointment, and then they would begin the process of doing triaging, creating an assessment, creating a care plan, helping with financial resources if necessary, helping with career resources, ultimately doing short-term therapy for the patient. And in that time period, we are working to find them a long-term therapist.
I was going to say, what percentage of the time you're able, because you said that was one of the big, it's not just access, but like,
So-
look at the, psychology website.
Yep. One of the major reasons why we're using the care navigation company is because we are actually making the appointment for the patient. So for those who struggle or are falling off the system due to decompensation, we will get them the right care with the right therapist. And it takes about 6 to 8 weeks, but during that 6 to 8 weeks, we're actually caring for them. And a lot of them actually get better during that 6 to 8 weeks and no longer need a long-term therapist. So,
Could we get into, I'm really curious about your competition, who you see
Yeah,
as
sure.
I don't know if that's your next
Yep.
slide.
Sure. So I think one of our main competitors is Quartet Health, where they work with the primary care doctor to get the patient care. So they
As
would
like
be
a
our
is
closest.
that a care navigator? Are they a software solution or services?
They are more of a care solution option, but they would be the closest to what we have.
Right.
Cerebral is one of the newest companies out there. They're more direct to consumer, but they have access to providing that patient with a clinician. BetterHelp, Modern Health, Talkspace, Headspace, they're all more of a direct to consumer, and they have the potential to connect these patients with care. They typically subcontract with therapists, and through that they're able to get their patients that care.
Got it. Let me ask a couple of other questions. TAM.
Yeah,
Do you have a TAM slide, total addressable market?
Yeah.
Let's jump to that now. Okay,
Sure.
great. So let's talk about your total addressable market, your
Sure.
TAM. I'd love to hear how you think about the market pricing and what you see as the
Yeah,
opportunity.
we have a large market opportunity. Mental health itself is a $188 billion problem. The way that we see the TAM is that there are about 250,000 primary care clinicians out there,
Right.
as well as about 400,000 therapists. If we were to sell to them, that would be about a $2.5 billion.
And what's the math behind that? Like a lot of times when we look at TAM, total addressable market, we often say, what's this number times the price per kind of thing. Like when you almost think about your TAM here, there's 250,000 primary care physicians. If I say on average, each one of them is dealing with 100 patients or 200 patients in their population, it's not probably accurate, 1,000 patients in their population, 25% of those are going to have a mental health issue.
Right.
I take that and then boom, now what do I make? What is that CPT code I'm billing? And that would be my TAM, just to simplify. Because then, and a lot of times, just like for total addressable market, we have a Dreamit dose on this. We love to say, show your math, show your work.
Yeah.
It's like when you were in high school, you have a high school
to
math
do your
teacher,
whole,
right? And there'd be on the thing, you can't just give the answer, you have to show your work.
Yep.
Big fan of show your work. And last one or two questions. If you looked out, one of the things that I think a lot about with startups is a lot of times they're not selling into the future far enough. Like right now, as we're having a conversation, it's fine. You're talking about your seed, you're talking about your Series A, and it gets you to 4 million. It's great, but a lot of VCs, if you're looking for VCs, venture capital, they want to bet on the next big thing. So I always love to hear what people's vision is.
Sure. Yeah, so Rose will be a leader in the mental health space. We strive to have early detection as well as our algorithms that are able to detect different depression, mood disorder symptoms, but we're also working on other algorithms for suicidal ideation and detecting suicidal ideation.
Okay.
So we have spent a significant amount of the money raised on the tech aspect of things because that's how we see us being able to scale and to actually get more people the right help at the right time. The ROSE score itself is something that we see being a global metric for mental health, where you would have clinicians in Europe, for example, quoting people or being able to diagnose a person on the ROSE score.
Can I restate it in one way,
Sure.
by the way? The way you could almost say it is like ROSE. Our vision for ROSE is this is just the beginning. We wanted to start in depression and anxiety because it's such a huge unmet need and it's such a big problem. But we look at it, we want ROSE to be almost like it's the operating system that a PCP operates on. When it comes to a mental health issue, ROSE is the solution. It's like it's the gold standard for how it's this tech-enabled way to help a PCP, help patients get the help they need. We start in this area, but the view is, you know, it's a little bit, and by the way, the way you're pitching it, it's eventually we want to fly to Mars.
Yeah.
First thing we need to do is get the rocket off the ground, then get to the moon, then, you know, so right now you're like the rocket's off the ground, you're trying to get to the moon, but a lot of times it's good to like, what's that long-term vision? Cool. Thanks for being on Dreamit Runway.
Thank you as well.
Thanks for being.
Appreciate it.
Clearance delivery, good afternoon. Cirrus 123 Papa Charlie looking to pick up an IFR to Wings Field, Lima Oscar Mike.
Alright, number 3 Papa Charlie, runway 16 left, cleared for takeoff.
16 left, clear for takeoff for 3 Papa Charlie.
November 3 Papa Charlie, turn left heading 030.
Left to 030 for 3 Papa Charlie.
Number 3 Papa Charlie, clear direct to Medina.
Direct Medina for 3 Papa Charlie. And sir, if you don't mind, I can make 5,000 my final. It's really smooth tonight.
Roger that.
So here are my thoughts on Lumi Health. I thought the entrepreneur did a great job pitching, really has his act together. You can tell he watched the Dreamit dose. If there was one thing I thought he could use a little help on, it was just I got a little confused for real about the problem statement. In his solution, he said, our solution's 10x faster. But I never heard in the problem that the problem was it wasn't fast enough. I mean, just make sure the solution solves the problem. They should fit like a hand in glove. You don't want where they fly past each other.
Security 46, clear direct. Expect a localizer 15 approach.
Now look, here are my thoughts on ROSE Health. Look, he's working in a really important problem space, but I think he had some challenges. The way he described the problem statement, remember, when you're talking about your problem statement with an investor, you really want to put guardrails into their mind quickly. It went a little too long and he can tighten that up. I think there are also some challenges understanding the TAM, and remember, like we talk about in the dose about TAM, show your work. Show the math of how that TAM comes together. Then the last thing I just want to highlight that we talked about is if you've got traction, drip it into your pitch. It's so important to weave traction into the story. Don't just leave it to the end. It's one of the most important things that investors want to hear, whether you're raising your seed, your Series A, your Series B. Weave that into the story. Don't just leave it to the end. Thanks for joining us for the first episode of Dreamit Runway. And a huge shout out to APP Jet Center in Manassas, Virginia for letting us film at their location today. To learn more about Dreamit Runway or suggest a company that should appear on the show, please go to dreamit.com/runway. Thanks for watching.